Hello everybody, Brian here, and we're just about to start another E5 podcast. This time, which is quite unique, we'll do it with a few of the guys. We'll switch it around a little bit, but we should only really start with the main man himself. And I've drawn the big straw, or the short straw. It's not the short straw because I'm quite honoured to be the person who does this. But we will be interviewing Mr. Meenan now. Going to ask him a series of questions. Some people have been throwing me some questions online, which I'm gonna fire at Paul, see what answers we get, and yeah, literally just a general chit chat between me and Paul. So Paul is here. Say hello, Paul.
Hello, everybody. I am in the interviewee seat, so this is unusual, but I was told this is what's happening, and as we are democracy in E5, I sometimes do what I'm told.
Very rarely, very rarely, but yes, he sometimes does what he's told. So we're going to start with a really brief, maybe a little bit more than brief, but just a little bit of a journey. For everybody who doesn't know, let's forget about the E5 as we know it today. When you met me in April 2013 and you walked up to me in that big room in Leeds and I said to you, what does that badge represent? You said to me, give me the story. Give the story again when you were talking about TFL.
I can't remember. It was that unmemorable ago. I think
Where
I
did
said
E5 come from?
I think my initial comments was because I got in touch with you via LinkedIn and asked if I could turn up, and it was very much social housing, but being the gobby Londoner, and everybody listening is probably nodding, being the gobby Londoner, I was so passionate about some sort of improvements to our industry, and what you were doing was trailblazing, without a doubt. And let's for the record say that what you were doing, your idea, is now the electrician EngTech program that the IET are currently rolling out across the country, which me and you are still involved with in some form. But I think when I met you, I had my original TFL badge on, and I think my first comments to you was, if you don't know, you don't know, or something to that extent. You'll never know, or something, or go and find out.
Had your barrier up.
I did have my barrier. Well, I was petrified. I was in a room full of 50 plus experts in their field. And I'll tell you now, social housing, the one thing that isn't said on public forums much, there is I know Grenfell has just made everything in the news, but the people who manage social housing and electrical building services compliance, these guys really are multitaskers. They're gurus. And to see a room full of them who absolutely were throwing their toys in a very professional way out of the pram at an industry leading body, it was just oxygen for me. I was just like, oh my God, there are so many people in our industry so frustrated with what's happening and what's going on. And I was absolutely in awe of sitting up near the front, near you. And when you came out to me, I think I was a little bit scared, to be honest with you.
Okay, let me tell you the bit that I remember. So, and you can, and it's always kind of sat right deep within me on this one, because I love the whole principle of this. And it's when I kind of prompted you on it, the badge, and everybody mentioned way back when it looks like the underground badge, and it did, and rightly so, because that's where you worked at the time. And
well, no, TFL was the TFL logo.
Yeah, it was the
for London, which owns London Underground and DLR and Overground. So it was
So you said to me, there are a select few who are allowed to wear this badge.
Oh, God.
I said to you, what do you mean a select few? And you said it's a secret. And I was like, are you going to let me in on the secret? And you said, because I've come all the way up to Leeds at my own cost, I will let you in on my secret. And that was the exact word you used. So you said to me that you had a ton of these badges made because you realised that there were a number of people who you bump into and work with who you trusted explicitly in regards to their competence. What you wanted to do was to give those people the badge so that if you weren't in the room and two of those people came together in a separate location, they would have the exact same feeling about trust, integrity, honesty in a meeting, and it just set people at ease. And that's when I said to you, the electrical industry needs this.
Yeah, it was very much, wasn't it? It was to identify if someone wore the badge, it was their statement to say, I want better change, I want better improvements, and I want to use something as my guiding light, which is why the E5 linked to the statement of ethical principles. But yeah, no, I do. God, blimey, that was years ago, dude.
It felt like a long time ago, but you stick to those kind of principles. And I think anybody who steps into, and we call it a business, but it's not a business. There's no legal entity. There's no nothing there. And
we're a rabble.
People, we are in one sense,
as we call it in London.
We struggle to get to a point where we can turn this into a legal entity without the industry looking at us and seeing, oh, it's becoming a commercial entity. And that's something that we're actively trying to avoid, because it's never, ever a driving force for us. And
yes. So
it's always been the same right from the beginning. So
let me be clear on that. So E5 was never started about money. It never will be about money. While I draw breath in my body, money will not be a driving factor in it. For those who are sitting there smirking and going, yeah, whatever, mate, I have spent thousands of my own money paying for website hosting, for badges over the years, over 3,000 badges, postage, envelopes, everything, touring around the country, driving across country. I have not had a penny refunded to me, literally tens of thousands of pounds of my own money. And there's loads of people thinking, oh my God, this Londoner's batshit crazy. No. As I've always said, I want to do everything I can with everything I have. And if more people did that, my God, there isn't an industry body alive or presence in this industry that could stop improvements from coming.
And yeah, and that's definitely true in terms of where E5 was and where we are today. You can, all of that hard work that you've done and where the places you've been, the talks you've done, there is nothing and there is no one all the way up from the grand high witch of the industry all the way down to the sparkies on the ground that can say that E5 has not made a positive difference to the electrical industry. And that is a guarantee.
I think, okay, so I've got a weird view on it, and I'm sure you'll either agree or disagree with me, because me and you do use each other as sounding boards many a time. For me, it's positive improvements. I don't like the use of the term change. When I've spoken, I've always hated the word change, like I hate the word scheme. Scheme by its very nature is divisive. Yeah. Change in almost insists upon something. Now, every electrician listening goes, the industry has to change. I agree with you, it does, but it can only improve steadily and slowly, because nobody's going to click a magic wand and say all of the competent person schemes are gone. This has changed. This has changed. It doesn't happen like that. You have to allow the industry to organically grow, mutate and improve into something that is steady and stable, where people know exactly where they stand in the industry and how newcomers can come in, and also people leaving the industry as well. I think that's really important. So slow and steady.
It is slow and steady. So, but we are making improvements is probably the better word then.
Yeah, I think when we've done stuff, we've probably not realized the impact it's had. But given the volume of emails we've had from people, and the fact that there are people wearing E5 badges in some of the remotest parts of the world, which took about 6 weeks to get them there and cost me about £35 just to send a couple of badges around the world. Absolutely incredible how much of a difference you do now start to see. But for me, when people say, oh, E5 are great, I always, you know me better than anybody, if somebody compliments me, the first thing I do is I just refuse any compliments, because when I was younger, my boss said, if you ever think you're good, you're not. Never think you're good at anything, because if you do, you'll lose your sharpness. And for me, E5, I'm really proud of what we've achieved. And if I popped my clogs tomorrow or walked out the industry tomorrow, I would be able to say I've contributed in some form. However, for me, this is a long journey, and I've got 20 years till I even think about retiring. So for me, this is a very, very long journey, and I'm going to be here long after all the old boys have retired.
Which is a great point, because it should never be. And there's a lot of people, especially on social media, let's not name anybody in particular, but there's a lot of people who want to see change and they want to see it now.
Yeah.
And they don't look at it as you have to build relationships. It's something I've obviously not done very good at over the last few years.
Have you really?
But it's a process of making relationships with people. And when I speak to other people in the industry, they say, no, you've got to make relationships with the right people. That just fuels the wrong mentality.
Yeah, no, that's wrong. Nobody should be. The tail should never wag the dog.
Yes, I agree.
The trouble is and we shouldn't be recording this because this is almost like an intimate chat here. But the people who want change immediately, my heart totally agrees with them in every way, shape, or form. The trouble is, and unless there is a Grenfell of the electrical industry, there will not be immediate change. We've learned from Grenfell that nothing goes quickly because profiteering and all of these companies spend hundreds of millions of pounds protecting themselves legally, tying everything up in loopholes, and justice in modern society is rarely done. The people that want change quickly, I'm with you 100%. The trouble is I genuinely think you're living in fucking Narnia. Excuse my language. You're living in Narnia. There is no way in hell that people will say, I want this gone, I want that gone, or I want this changed. Nothing will change overnight. You know, there are some people that don't want the JRB card, or they don't want the NIC to run a CPS or whatever, and they'll bang on about it. And the trouble is they weren't going to change. All they'll do is they'll cast them aside, and they'll go into the barrel of bitter and twisted, noisy sparks who will forever fester. And that's scary, to be honest with you, because there's quite a few of them in our industry.
We should engage more with these people, because I think by ignoring them or fueling the for instance, we talk about short courses, which is not really what this is about, so we'll not go into too much detail. But when we talk about short courses, and a lot of people disagree with them, but they fight against the fact that they disagree with them, but they never give suggestions to how to fix it. And the truth is that those short courses are probably paying for somebody to sit on a yacht in Monaco, day in, day out, looking back at the electrical industry, thinking blah, blah, blah. And they'll be a very powerful person who is very well connected. And if we come out and start saying, get rid of all the short courses, you instantly go up against a barrier that isn't just a case of get 100 people to push the barrier over. You're fighting against things that are business, and it's difficult. It is difficult.
Changing business is impossible if you're not internally directing that business. All you can do is suggest stuff, and all a business will do is take your good ideas and use them as a marketing or business opportunity, and anything that they don't want to do that affects their bottom line, they will walk away from, and they will just cast you aside. We know, because we've had ideas that have been nicked off of us. The one thing I will say though is, yeah, I mean, short courses, I hate them, but then again, they have to stay, because when the 18th edition comes out, it's a 3-day short course. By definition, the design and verification is a short course. The 2391 is a short course. I think what the problem is the people that train in 7 days, 5 days, 12 days, 15 days, 3-month courses, they are fundamentally wrong. And I wish to God that they were gone in a heartbeat. However, before you even have that discussion, you need to look at the big picture of the industry. These courses have been around 20, 30 years, right? The industry's been in a decline for a long period of time. So you need to somehow measure where the industry is, not just by the number of JRB gold card holders, but how many people are working in the electrical industry, whether they're an approved gold card, an operative, an improver, a mate, or self-employed, whatever they are. If they're working on or near electrical systems, what is the current state of the industry? What's the state of qualification, grading? What was their background? How did they train? Because like it or not, everybody who works in this industry is here for one reason: to feed their families. And not one person has a God-given right to stop another person from feeding their family. If I walked up to you and we were on a building site and I said, get out of here, you know, Mark, you haven't got a gold card, you'd want to headbutt me. Because it may be that you've done everything necessary to get a gold card, but you missed one part on your AM2 because you were dyslexic. But yet, actually, when it comes to bending conduit, doing double sets, swan necks, and all the rest of it, you're far superior than me.
I can relate to that 100%, and the reason why I can relate to that is when I was employed in a local authority, we did a full assessment on qualifications of people doing electrical work in buildings, and we identified an individual who had a team of 4 people working for him. He was a subcontractor for a contractor who had the contract, and he had no electrical qualifications whatsoever, and he was rewiring properties. Now, I'm telling you right now, God's honest truth, he was the best electrician I have ever come up against who can do house bashing and wiring a domestic property. I had to, and it broke my heart telling him that rules were rules within the authority, and he couldn't work for that principal contractor, and knowing, heart of hearts, that he was probably better than the other 400 plus electricians that were working for the council at the time. It is, yeah, you're right. You're right.
I worked with a guy, the very first electrician I ever met when I stepped my first day in employment as a spark. I met a guy called Chris. I never remembered his name for years until recently. And I got in the van and he grabbed my knee and he went, "Hello, Sonny, I'm going to teach you everything I can." And after a few weeks, I said to him, "So have you got I keep hearing this gold card." He went, "Nope, I'm not qualified at all." Turns out, when I asked the boss of the company, he was dyslexic. He got his part 1, he failed his part 2, he resat it 5 times, he just couldn't do advanced exams. He was the best electrician in the company, bar none, and they actually paid him the full rates of a spark because his work spoke for himself. And I think in modern times, maybe this is something that if you were to influence something on the industry, that if you were going to do a project where for a number of years you understand the levels of competency, not just in qualifications, but you had inspectors out on sites assessing the competence of individual workers, and they could then understand and help that electrician and say, "Do you know what, you're a decent spark, but you might want to develop your skills," so that an electrician becomes a continually improving guy, not just a pipe bender, because a pipe bender is not a spark. They're just a meccano builder. If you spend 10 years on a job just bending pipe and trunking, whoopee-doo, I'm happy for you, but that does not make you a bloody electrician. I've had guys come up to me and say, "I don't do pyro, I don't do armours, I don't do this." As the Gold Card Brigade say, you should be able to do it all. And do you know what? I was brought up with that mindset. You should be able to do it all. However, human compassion dictates that, yes, if a guy's bending conduit for 5 years, he ain't going to remember half that stuff because he spent 5 years on sites just doing that one bit. So we have to be compassionate and allow people to reskill, refine tune there and redevelop. And short courses work for that. But I think for the industry, there needs to be an assessment from all schemes. I hate that term. All private voluntary regulatory bodies, that's the technical term, and they need to work together to assess everybody. And it may be that we actually take the gold card and we say, right, we're going to reinvigorate the gold card as the standard. It may be that they all say, well, the Eng Tech Elec is the standard, but we know the Eng Tech Elec is competency against a framework. It's not practical skills, and that's the difference between the JRB and the IT schemes, which we say regularly at the IT events. But something needs to be done, and that piece of work will take a number of years, and it needs buy-in from all the bodies. If it did,
we're going to get that.
Hey,
do you think we'll get that? Do you think the electrical industry will ever get a complete buy-in? I have an opinion, but this is all about you.
Well, let's put it like this. If a member of the royal family were killed from electrocution, you'd watch our industry change tomorrow.
I disagree.
I think so. If there was sufficient...
You have very senior politicians who have lost kids.
That's true, Part P. Of course, Part P, yeah.
Part P's come in, and it has
Emma Shaw as well, yeah.
Yeah, you've got Emma Shaw, you've got Thurza Whittle, you've got Ralph Kennedy.
For those who are listening, the Emma Shaw case, if you Google Emma Shaw's death, that is an absolutely tragic event, which was totally avoidable from just a lack of testing. It's well worth looking up as a bit of CPD.
Well, don't just go for Emma Shaw. Look at Thurza Whittle. That's the one that really hit home for me.
I'm not familiar with Thurza Whittle. What happened there?
Thurza Whittle was a lady who was so excited about moving into a house down in the countryside, sold her house and moved out with her young family. Moved down to, I can't remember where it was, but she moved into a cottage, renting it for a few weeks until her house was ready. And her child, who was only a kind of a toddler, a toddler found her in the bath. Unfortunately, she had died because the property didn't have an earth. And when they did an investigation, the landlord said the electrician cancelled the day before doing a test on the property, and he couldn't get there to do the test. And it is worth reading the story. It's when I started kind of looking into the industry quite a lot. I looked at Thurza Whittle, I looked at Emma Shaw, I looked at Ralph Kennedy, and there's a few other kind of really high profile ones that kind of hit home, and I
didn't know about them ones. That's a frightening statistic. The trouble is at the moment with the industry bodies, they are for-profit organisations, and the only thing that can happen is government pressure. And we know from our IET work that even the IET, when about 2.5 years ago now, I was asked to stand up at the RSSU conference, which for those who don't know what that is, if you volunteer for the IET, so 2.5 years ago I got chartered status. I don't have a degree. I got chartered engineer status by literally mapping my entire life and everything I've ever done on paper. And then very soon after I got fellow as well, which I'm really proud of, because nobody or nothing will take that away from me, because I got that from very hard work, hence lots of grey hair and grey beard. But I got asked to stand up and tell my life story, which I absolutely hated, and I was nervous all the way through. But the last 2 slides, I remember talking to you about it. I wanted to put a message to the industry, and that was when I told the IET about E5. And I told them what it was and where it came from, which they all loved. And then I stood up and I basically said, look, dear IET, you have not been the home for electricians since 2007, when you merged with the IE. And the only thing we know you for is the regs book, which you sell us every few years, but you've effectively abandoned us. Now, I was allowed to say that because I'm really sad, and I quoted all their rules and bylaws that allowed me to challenge them on that in front of their entire exec. And are they doing enough? I mean, they're doing a lot, but whether it's enough is another thing. Time will tell. But they even said while we were doing the EngTech stuff that the government have told them that unless they get, what is it, 80% of all the electricians?
65%.
65%, sorry, of all electricians to write to the government or pick it or whatever, not pick it.
On one register.
On a register that want improvement, they will then legislate for that improvement, which means basically we're an abandoned trade. And we are a trade that plays on risk and the electricity at work regs prosecutions, which we know, if you look at any statistics, prosecutions are actually going up. Electrical accident figures are actually going up. Our flash incidents are going up, which is a new science, even on LV, which is going up. Henceforth, all this new technology is coming in. You know, arc fault detection devices, they're coming in. And let's be honest about it, they are a mitigation of really crap electricians.
So that brings me. Actually brings me really, really nicely onto.
Here we go.
In fact, no, I'll ask these questions afterwards because I've got a few other questions I want to ask about E5 first.
Okay.
Because we do, it's a standard phone. It's like a phone call for me and you. We head off in different directions all the time. But if I was to say to you, what is your proudest moment of E5 to date? What would you say?
Oh wow! Oh my goodness me!
You judged on the answer. You won't upset anybody. It's just from your own personal perspective. What can you?
Okay, so other than some of the very sweet emails I've had from people, I think my proudest moment was when we did a live events tour about a year and a bit ago, and NAPIC came out with us, which was really cool. But we had like the ECA there, we had the NIC at Swansea, and we talked and we spoke, and their area engineers said it was really, really good and they really enjoyed it. And everybody just basically came up and said, we've never heard people talk like that. Every single person, no matter what their background, got something from it. And I was, to be honest, I think I was bouncing off the walls for 2 days afterwards. I think that's one of my proudest moments.
I think we get that a lot though, Paul, when we do talks and we meet people. That is a common of E5, not just
weird, isn't it? Telling the truth and people go, oh my God, that was refreshing. Frightening.
When you stand up and speak from the heart and you remove the political bullshit from an opinion, people engage with that quite a lot. So, okay, so Swansea and the live events was a highlight. If you look back a few years and think, right, well, this is where my head was in E5, and when we started to kind of grow the E5 principle as a whole, and the group, and we spent hours and hours writing envelopes out, and I once sent the envelopes. I think I sent 45 individual badges with envelopes with the wrong size stamp, and all 45 started giving me grief saying I didn't get my badge, so I had to send another 45 with the bigger stamp on. And when you look back to then and where we are now, would you change anything?
Would I change anything? Oh, God, these are really good questions. I don't really like to live my life with any regrets. I think in life, if I could go back and change anything, it'd be when I was younger and tell myself to buy properties, because, you know, they would have gone up in value and I would have been financially secure. With E5, not really, no, to be honest with you, because this has been a massive, massive journey. It's gone on a roller coaster pace that we never expected. But can I just also interject my second proudest moment of E5?
Okay.
I want to ask, do you know what that was?
I could probably guess.
It was meeting you.
Get out.
It was. That everyone's going to go, oh, bless him. He's so lovely.
What people don't realize on the podcast is you can only hear our voices. We can see each other's faces.
Yes, the truth. Love you. No, but no, seriously, it was because I think the one thing that's made us really strong is each other's personality and the dynamics of the ideas. And when we sat around that table in Coventry and were just bouncing stuff off, it's fairly evident people seem to think we're some sort of rabble, and yet there is stuff that's happened recently that we were talking about 2 years ago. Sowing seeds, sowing ideas, you know, dropping ideas into people's heads and watching them grow, you know, physical things that we've done. And you almost get to a point now where you can predict stuff reasonably well. Yeah.
We've done a pretty good job. I think my kind of regrets really, and I know this is all about you, but it's to try and prompt you to come out with something which I know you're thinking about. You just need it to be teased out. When we talk about E5 and we talk about who we not align with, not who we partner with, who we try and engage with and give honest feedback about the way that they do things, is now I've in my time in the electrical industry, I've wrote my blogs. Everybody knew about the blogs. I got a lot of grief for them.
Did you write a blog? I wouldn't have known.
Yeah. So
you mean Dempseygate?
If I talk about a regret for me, I wish, and I know you feel the same, that we could engage more with people like the ECA, like the NIC, because at the moment it does feel like there is a barrier there because they feel threatened to what we do there.
Yeah, okay. So let's have that conversation. So before we go on, hello, Paul, Mr. Collins, and everybody else, if you are listening, this is the bit that you stop and listen to now, NIC and ECA. It's really weird and it's really disappointing. So, and I'm going to put that into context because years ago, I think around the same time I met you, I was working for Transport for London. I was very passionate about getting into the industry somehow, being able to influence or do something that contributed, so that I can say I'm doing my little bit, you know, provide. And the one thing I do have is, as you know, I give me a subject matter and my brain goes like a washing machine and I just spit ideas out left, right and centre. Yeah. And I went to meet, I had an issue with an NIC contractor and they were just crap. They got onto my railway via a tenancy and they were rubbish. So I spoke to their technical director. He actually invited me up, which was very kind of him. And I walked into a room and I met Mr. Collins, I believe Mr. Wells, and I got fortunately to meet Emma Clancy, which was really nice. They were very courteous, good hosts, and they asked me my opinion. So we spoke about, you know, the world in general. We spoke about the issues I had at TfL, and they were immediately actioning, which was great because that was good for a client to see. But we spoke about the industry, and I just poured my heart out to them. And I remember Emma Clancy sitting there. Hello, Emma, if you're listening. And she just kind of, I wouldn't say wasn't interested. She kind of just was like, I was trying to say, look, it's like you guys giving an assessment of the industry. So Searchshaw assessing the electrical industry is like somebody standing on a big lake that's frozen over. I'm at the shore going, the ice is cracking. The ice is cracking underneath you. And Churchill standing going, looking down and going, no, it isn't. Well, no, it is. I can see it from here. No, it isn't. It was like that blatant denial. And I was going, look, I'm not here to attack you. Anyone who remembers me, I was an NICQS for £100 million worth of stationary wires. I had NIC T-shirts, high-vis, hard hats, pencils. I was the biggest NIC fanboy, literally in the southeast of England, from about 2000 to 2005. I was a huge fanboy. Loads of people, and this is really hacks me off, have come up to me and gone, oh, I hear you had the NIC. And I'm like, when the fuck have I ever actually said, who the hell are you? And when the hell have I ever actually said this to you, considering I've just met you?
So let me tell you why people, one of the interesting things, which is we're electricians, we like to play with numbers. So let me give you an equation that is not as complex as time squared, value for k, square root, and adiabatic equations and all that.
S equals square root time of a k.
Let's not talk about that level of complexity. Okay. We are literally about to explain what you've just said with simple numbers.
Right.
If I was to walk out of my house, not now because it's late and very few Sparkies will be out working where I live, but if it's tomorrow to walk out and pick the first electrician to just have a look at their work,
it
is very likely that that electrician is going to be an NIC EIC contractor.
Yes.
Because there is 37,000 of them, as opposed to the 12 or 15,000 of the other of NAPIT, who are the other kind of major competent person scheme. So when we look at social media and when we talk about things and we get bad pictures and so on, there is a likelihood, because of the percentages of the people who are registered with these schemes, that it is likely going to be an NIC EIC contractor. Now that doesn't in any way say that the NIC contractors are worse than any other contractors. No, it's just numbers.
And do you know what? I've got a theory behind that. So when I was an NIC contractor, again, one of my career highlights. In fact, if anything, I would say that passing my QS inspection, and it was not an assessment, it was an inspection with a chap by the name of Bob Kemp. He's now retired, but Mr. Kemp, if you're listening, thank you for your service to the industry, because he was a wonderful old boy. And the first thing he said to me was, hello, Sonny, I'm not going to assess you, I'm inspecting you. You better be good. And I loved him because he was old school. He was a bull in a china shop and he grilled me. And one of the things that I found with the NIC generally, you're right, a lot of the work is you can attribute to their contractors. And I keep saying this because we're grown men now, we're intelligent. It's not the NIC's fault, but possibly the way that their models have changed. Because years ago, there was this thing that was spoken about by air engineers, that if they're really bad, keep them in the fold, score them and mark them, and get them on an improvement pattern that costs them money to have more regular inspections instead of throwing them out. When in actual fact, the electrical industry is tough, and tough love sometimes. I know they'll immediately say, well, the E5 group are saying that we should be throwing them out, which is socially irresponsible. No, it's not. There used to be a name and shame. We've thrown you out because you're crap or you haven't paid your money, which was normally the main reason they threw them out. But
you can't blacklist people now, can you?
No, you can't blacklist them. But if they're rubbish and they're doing substandard work, then you've got two options. You work with them or you throw them out. Now, it depends on the level. So there are some guys, if I'm doing an inspection, I would see whether they were caring and consciously competent enough to not know these little bits and work on an improvement plan with them. But if they're just these idiots who just lash stuff in because that's what they did somewhere else and they're just completely unaware of it because they get a bloke to sign off a certificate and now they want to get registered, then the alarm bells need to go up. And I know Jim O'Neill, who's the new technical director there, I've had some chats with him on the phone and he is very old school. And I know the NIC are wanting to very much raise the bar, not standards, that's a terrible term, raising standards, I mean seriously, but they want to raise the bar, they want to improve the quality and the checks and make it a little bit tougher, which is wicked.
Really positive to hear. Yeah, it is really positive.
So yeah, and it is positive to hear. At the end of the day, when I had that chat with Emma, I was a bit disappointed when I left, but I then went away and understood this is a business model. I can't just walk in and say, you might want to change that, because they're just going to tell me to do one. So you need to be able to come up with some suggestions or some facts or statistics to say, do you realize that your business model is being destroyed by incompetent workers who are hiding behind your marketing brand? And that's a problem. Now, we don't put pictures up online for people to say it's the NIC or it's NAPIT or Stroma. We put pictures up online, which if you check out our new Instagram page, you will see some exclusive industry pictures, which nobody's ever seen before. And what we ask you to do is code them and put the reg numbers. And I can tell you why, because I have seen people, when I was younger, we would go, cool, look at that job. What a lash up. I'd look at it and go, why? Why is it a lash up? I don't know. Obviously, I was an apprentice at the time, but you don't know that you don't know. And it's only when people are in a general consensus going, it's wrong because it's not good workmanship materials or not in line with this or not 50 mil from the joist or it's not bonded correctly or it's not configured. You learn from your mistake. Let's be honest about it. Sparking, like anything, is a journey through life. When you're 20, you look back at your teens. When you're 30, you look back at 20. When you're 40, you look back at your 30s and you realize how much you mature.
Yeah.
You know, and you always find your decade of music is the best decade of music. It's the same with sparking. You will look back and go, oh, I mean, even Tom Nagy on his videos, he openly admits that his first jobs were just dogs' breakfasts, which is a very honest and bold thing to do, because I'll admit I have done some absolute stinkers when I was an apprentice. And the worst thing I did was I tried the domestic world, having come from industrial sparking, thinking, yeah, it's all the same. It's only a bit of twin and earth, you know, and it weren't. You know, I've always said when you go from domestic to industrial, you are almost retraining to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And it's the vice versa. It really is. But there's a lot of bullshiness. There's a lot of, you know, it's a wire, it's a switch. Yeah, it is. But guess what, folks? What's connected to it is getting more complex. The configurations are getting more complex, and the technology is making it harder.
Well, do you think that level of understanding is, if you're just a sparky, and I don't mean that in any derogatory way, not just a sparky, but if you're a practicing electrician and somebody comes up to you and says, what's the reg number for that? Do you think the sparky on the tools, it's a bit of a leading question, do you think the sparky on the tools should be able to spit out the regulations like that and understand them? Or do you think, because I'm the same as you, when I worked on the tools, there's some jobs I probably, if I could, I'd go back today and fix them.
Yep, same here.
Fit them a little bit better than I did. But I started to understand regulations, guidance, acts, housing act, and all of this stuff when I went into the client role, or when I moved into looking at electrical work that I hadn't done rather than carrying out the electrical work. Do you think you learn more about standards, regulations, and acts when you step away from the tools?
Yeah, massively. Well, yes, to an extent. I mean, one thing I loved was when I was on the tools, I got to do all the update courses. So every time there was amendment, I went, because I was young, I went on a 3-day update course. And it was there in the update course that you'd see a bloke and he'd go, electricity work regulations, regulation 8, earthing, 12, 13, 14, 15, you know, lighting, space, ventilation. You all remember that? And everyone in the room looked at each other like, no. Oh, hang on a minute, that's the poster that goes on the door of the switch rooms, isn't it? And nobody ever reads anymore. Yeah, I suppose you should make it. And what you do is you'd leave the course and make an effort to read it and go, oh, actually, this is quite interesting. But I don't expect electricians to remember reg numbers. But what I do want from electricians is an enthusiasm or a spark for them to want to keep learning.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing I ask electricians to do, and ask my guys, is if they have the time, which I'll happily make the time now I'm their client, is to just remember the fundamental principles, chapter 13. And I've recorded another podcast, just me going through external influences, because having met tens of thousands of sparks, it's forgotten. It's just forgotten. We install blindly. If we're the designer, we just wire from A to B, size it out the on-site guide. It really is more complex than that. And I see installations that are in, I mean, one of the pictures on our Instagram page is 5 years old. It looks 20. And you look at the wiring in it, it's a set of junction boxes, stainless steel Copex, brand spanking new, brand new color wiring, brand new terminals and DIN rails, everything else turned to dust. External influences not considered. Now, there are a lot of sparks who on a lot of sites, they will turn around and go, this is wrong, that's wrong, because the conscientious ones, the technicians, the foremans, they do constantly read and review. For me, the basic electricians, they should be able to understand the basics and the isolation procedures. However, my 20 plus years experience, I can tell you now, there is a huge parity between competencies, unless on the big jobs, because on the big jobs, you get the unionized sparks, and the unionized sparks very much close ranks, and they all have a common work rate, work quality, which is okay. But I found that a lot of them just want a deal, or they want price work, or they just want to drag the job out. That's not a besmirch on every single electrician. I've met some phenomenal guys. T. Clark, just off the charts there, guys. I have seen some of the most conscientious, hard-working apprenticeship served. I mean, if I was going to ask anyone to do apprenticeship, I'd send them to T. Clark. Just off the charts.
It's a good endorsement for T. Clark. You can have that one for nothing, T. Clark.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, they don't thank you, by the way.
So what's really interesting is a statement that you've just made there, and bringing it back to E5 again. When we first met, I remember I have a really strange memory, and I'll tell you a quick story after this, but that's how weird my memory is. You said to me when we were talking about the competence of electricians in the country, we were stood in that big room in the Park Plaza Hotel opposite Leeds train station, and you said to me, all you would ask is that every electrician understands the fundamental principles and regulation 29 of the electricity at work regs.
That's right, yeah.
And you said to me, if you read, and I've done it loads of times, and I did it straight after that, and I told all the Sparkies that work with me, read the fundamental principles, chapter 13, read it 8 times, and read chapter 29, regulation 29 of the electricity at work regs, read that 8 times. And if you understand all of those, for everybody's information, Paul is now showing me a copy of the electricity at work regs.
You mean a printed copy, yes? I
remember when you said that to me. So just and I'm really good with memory. And just as an example, the other day I was driving back from Birmingham, and I pulled into a service station to get a drink, and I spotted a guy who I thought I've recognised that guy from somewhere, and I didn't know, and then it clicked on the Instagram. There's somebody I used to go to school with. It's her husband, and I've never met him, but I've seen him on the pictures. So I sent a message through, and she come back and says, yeah, he's on his way back from Cardiff. And I just thought, which is really weird. It's either a small world or it's just a mad, crazy memory thing that I've got.
That is, you have a weird memory thing. I have realised that over the years that I have this weird, ornate memory that gives me a unique way of thinking. I wish to God more people had it, because I think society would be a little bit better, because I don't want anything from society other than to, when it's my time to go in the box, people can say he made a difference to my life. It was a positive one, and he was a mental nutter who liked to have a laugh.
I think there's a few people in the electrical industry who could see that now, and you've still got 20 years left. So you're definitely on a pedestal to do that. So let me. There's a few questions from a few people.
Hang on, before we do, just for the avoidance of doubt for this podcast. So I don't worry, this will be a long one. Regulation 29 is the defence clause. And the defence clause quite clearly states, in any proceedings for an offence consisting of a contravention of Regulation 4, which is safe systems of work, 5, equipment fit for use, 8, earthing and bonding, 9, 10, 11, 12, which we know, space light and ventilation, preparing for work, working on or near live conductors, 16, competence, which is another one. It shall be a defence for any person to prove they took all reasonable steps and exercise due diligence. So reasonable steps and due diligence are terms you need to put in your vocabulary. And then it says in criminal proceedings, which means if somebody screws up big time, a defence for a duty holder who can establish they took all reasonable steps. Now, as a spark, if you then take reasonable steps and discharge due diligence to your governors and the duty holders, and you exercise due diligence to prevent that offence, then you are covered. I hate to say it, your arse is covered, but your duty holder's backside will be opening and closing like a diaphragm.
50 pence manhole.
Absolutely.
So, just to add on to that, because we always like to educate the industry a little bit more. Indeed. So the regulations that Paul just quoted, the electricity work regulations is categorised into 2 types of regulations. The ones that Paul's just quoted are classed as absolute regulations. The other regulations are classed as reasonably practicable. Now, reasonably practicable is a horrible term, I feel, because there's too much ambiguity, or there's too much leeway around, well, I think that we should do this, or I believe that we should do this. But the one thing which is good about the regulations is the absolute regulations. There is nothing you can say or do to justify not doing it.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. The one that always I'm blown away by that in 2019 people still don't actually get it is Regulation 8, earthing or suitable precautions. The absolute, by the way, is inferred by the word shall. If the word shall is in the sentence, it means you're doing it, pally boy Miladio, even if you haven't tendered for it. Henceforth, I always say to Sparks, the no alterations and additions regulation, which 13216, which ends in the thing on bonding. If you don't do it, you're in breach of a statutory law. So, and I keep repeating that because it's one that Sparks just don't know, and the ones that do, well, they tend to cruise by a little bit easier and sleep at night a little bit better.
Yeah, they do.
Anyway, go on.
A little bit of CPD. So anyway, what I want to do is I've got a few questions that we'll name drop. The first one is, it's interesting that we were just talking about constantly updating your skill. I really, really loved a post from this guy the other day because he said, he put a screenshot of Sparky Ninja doing his 18th edition talks, and Mark put he's done his 18th edition, but he's just watching these videos again to upskill himself. Absolutely no reason to do it, but
no,
Mark Fort's a qualifying supervisor up at Carbon Homes. I've known Mark for a year or so now, and great guy. And he so his questions. Now I want you to be brutally honest, okay? So the first question Mark is asking is, does our trade have an old school mentality? I think we kind of covered that.
Yes, it's very much the captain of the Titanic almost being in denial that the boat's sinking. Yes, it does. I wish it didn't. However, I think as individuals, we need to be the bigger persons. And I don't mean that in an arrogant or narcissistic way. I mean that if you know what you're going to encounter, you have to adapt your approach. And if you know you're going to walk into a room of people who hate you and are bullish, then don't be bullish back. Actually be yourself and make them realize that you are a kind, decent person and that you don't hate them. At the end of the day, remember, every single person, regardless of who they are, has a family to feed. It's the ones that want to get really fucking greedy and shit on people. They're the ones that I don't mind tearing a peg off, to be perfectly frank. And there are a lot of them in the industry.
There is. Second question from Mark is, technology in the sector, in the electrical sector, is evolving rapidly. We're seeing this with the EV charging points and stuff.
Yes, we are.
Would you say, generally, we're making the most of the technology that's in the sector?
No, because it's coming out too quick. And it's changing too quick. And it delivers value for nobody, because we're going out and buying something and 4 years later it's becoming obsolete. And all it does is it pisses off the people who own it, and it pisses off the contractors who are installing it. Because they can't get 5 minutes to stop themselves from being spun round, and it's almost a race to who can learn this stuff the quickest. It's almost a speculate to accumulate. Learn it, pay out for the knowledge, pay out for this, hope to God you'll make money, otherwise you'll go bankrupt, which then generates some horrendous behaviours. You can get tables now with touchscreen computers in them and hologrammatic projectors and 8K TVs where you need smart home, the CDIA standards, and it's good. We know we're evolving, and it's always optional. The wonderful thing about the world, it's about money and it's about democracy. If people choose to pay the money, great. And there is lots of opportunity, and this is one good thing the ECA really do well, is they do help their members upskill, and they're heavy on the smart sector so they can see where it's going. But then again, they actually sit on all the panels about all the regs anyway, so of course they can see where it's going. But yes, I think it's pissing people off.
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree. So Mark also says that there's some fantastic innovation in our current generation, but he wants to know, can we actually modernise whilst we try to rebuild a fractured industry? If we look at innovation, we look at innovation. We look at
yes, I think we can, because I'm trying to, where I work, to build a electrical centre of excellence. Not an actual building, by the way. but I'm trying to adapt the behaviors at all levels. And as I'm the client, I get to lead those behaviors. I'm trying to adapt the behaviors of everybody in the supply chain to come to work, have fun, and do a really good job. And the worst thing is it actually freaks people out, which speaks volumes of the behaviors in the industry. But most of the guys are actually willing to go on that journey, which is good. So I think individual account, I don't, people, a lot of people don't realize how much influence they can have as long as it's channeled within their little sphere of influence. You imagine if 1,000 electrical industry managers decided to change the behaviors of the way they were working, and the people around them and upskilled and fought back's a horrible word, but challenge back and are, really epitomize optimizing everything they're doing, giving value and teaching, then you would start to see some spheres of influence changing.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with anything you've said.
But I think you can be the difference you want to be. Whether you can change the industry, no. I'd love for one man to come in and do all of it. I most certainly can't, but I am going to do my darndest best to use a collaborative, cooperative approach to influence improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving swiftly on, we've got Adrian Davey and Craig O'Neill, who are
they? Who are Adrian Davey and Craig O'Neill? Are they on social media? I have no idea who those two chaps are.
Not they are. So
Adrian, Craig.
They are both asking, when is E5 going to visit Steve Willis training?
When they relocate near to London. Okay. So no. That's a very good question.
What would be good? Where's the Steve Willis training? Is that down where Adrian?
Somewhere near Hove.
Ah, right. Okay.
Somewhere Hove or Plymouth. It's right on the south coast.
We should. I guess the answer is let's get an official invite from them through an email, through the E5 email.
I'm pretty sure we've already got one.
Have we got one?
I'm pretty sure we have, but the trouble is we've got hundreds, and I could spend 2 weeks going through the email box at the moment and still not get through it.
Adrian and Craig, this is from me to you. Drop me an email at ryan@thecomplianceworkbook.com with the invite you've already sent to Paul. And me and Paul will have a look at some dates, and we'll suggest some, and we'll put a little bit of a date together.
So can I put, that's a prudent point to put a message to people who are asking for our help, support, and attendance. I joined a company where I expected to do a 37-hour week. I work a 60-hour week for reasons that eventually I will be able to share with the world in a story. But at the moment, I work very long hours. I'm on call. I work weekends occasionally. I work for a very good employer, gives me the flexibility to do volunteering work. But let's be perfectly frank, we are constantly in all of our spare time helping individuals or talking to manufacturers or preparing for elects or doing something else. And do you know what? I have no idea how we all do what we do. I really don't. And if we can get to elects and pull that off as well, wow. So we all work full time. So we're not those wonderful companies where if you go online and register for someone to attend in a van, we're not those sorts of companies. We can't just turn up with a big van and give out loads of gifts and stuff. That's just not us. But what we can do is turn up with loads of passion, education, knowledge, real world experience, and maybe even some manufacturers in tow as well. But we will get round to you. I think what we said we would try it one per quarter or one per term to get round amongst us. It won't be all of us. It'll probably be a pair of us because we all do amazingly live at literally opposite sides of the country. It's freaky that you and Dave somewhere up in Winterfell or up north past the Yorkshire, wherever. And then obviously you've got the Welsh boyo, and then you've got me in the southeast. Dan's only just moved up into deepest, darkest Essex, so he's about 15 miles away, but it takes about an hour to drive. But yeah, so it is a voluntary thing, and there are guys who we've helped who've wanted to do other stuff, and we've empowered them to go out to colleges and make donations in E5's name, and you know we do everything we can, we can.
Let's get some dates together for Adrian and Craig.
Yes, fine. We need
to maybe there's another one that's in the E5 folder at the moment. Up near where my office is. Let's get them a response.
Well, no, there's also East London as well. There's Bob Naseda's crew. Havering College have been asking a lot longer than Adrian and Craig. Sorry, guys,
I'll
but
tell you what,
Bob Naseda is front of the queue.
Let's get all of them together. Let's get them all. Let's get some dates together. Let's not do one a quarter. Let's do all 4 of them, or whatever's outstanding. Let's get them on a little tour, and we'll do them over a month period. We'll visit them all somehow.
Oh yeah, no. In fairness, we could actually do it just over a couple of days. Just take 2 days off and spend one day in Havering College, and the next day we go down to Plymouth or Hove.
Let's do it.
And do that.
Let's do it.
I've got my rigs downstairs, so that's not a problem.
So to answer your question, we will look at some dates. We'll get them in the
look
diary.
at November or December. Why not?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Done.
Finally,
Next question.
One more question. Now, let me give you a bit of context around this man. You will know who he is. I really enjoyed communicating with him. We were on WhatsApp for a bit of time until he fell out with me because I wasn't seeing what he wanted me to say. Many a night, and the one night I remember, it was very late. He was working somewhere like South Africa, and he called me up asking the correct way to calculate an earth for a transformer. What size earth for a particular size transformer?
Okay,
so me and him sat on the phone for about an hour, working out, looking at the regs. So Gary has asked the question: why are we supporting and promoting the electricians workers branch with Sam and Ricky? Why is E5 aligned ourselves with them?
E5 are a separate entity from the IW. Oh, I can't. It was Independent Workers Branch, IWGB, EWB. So I know who you're talking about, for God's sake. Wow. Okay.
He's a good. He's a.
Do you know? I'm sure he is. I'm sure his heart's in the right place.
He shoots from the hip a few times. And
listen, I used to be a militant spark too, mate. Trust me, I used to be a militant spark. I used to wave the gold card and do all that. If you're not NIC, you're this. I used to be there. Trust me, I've been there and done it. So very clearly, we met Sam and Ricky a while back when I got invited to attend their what do you call them? They're like local union meeting. Now I have fallen out with every single union, because every single union that I've ever been in and paid my subs has, when we needed them, failed us flat, because they were basically bought by the management of whatever organisation. So I don't begrudge unions, and I know they do wonderful things for people. So I don't begrudge, Amicus, Unite, all these guys. I don't begrudge any of them. But I got asked to go to their event, so I did a talk. Everybody was very courteous, very polite. I saw lots of passion in the individual guys' eyes, and how can you not like that? So naturally, I've liked some of the stuff on social media. I've shared some of their stuff on social media. I've invited Ricky and Sam to come and do a ramble, which we filmed for YouTube. When they started their podcast, they invited, I think it was Dave first, or you maybe, and then Dave.
No,
basically,
Dave, you, Dan, and me.
They didn't do you. Oh, okay.
They did do me.
They did. Right. Oh, okay. Yeah, they did. Sorry. So we got asked to do a podcast, which is a Skype call, which is exactly what we're doing now. Yeah. And we've met them at Alex, and they're nice chaps. They're family men. But we're not aligned. I mean, how the fuck can we align when we're not even a formal entity? Seriously, we're not self-employed. We're managers of contracts. You own a software company. All we're doing is running around the country helping individuals to be the best they can be. That's not fucking alignment. Seriously, get over yourself. I don't mean that in a rude way, but Jesus H. Christ, man, it's just. I went to one of their events, I've been on their podcast, and all we get is this constant shit. You are wasting electrons, man. You're wasting energy and keyboard strokes.
Listen,
I'll happily talk to him. I'd love to talk to him and shake his hand.
I do have a lot of time for Gary. Like I say, I've had a.
Well, if you do, then I will. But I'd rather shake the man's hand and see the white in his eyes. And I guarantee you, everything he says to me, I'd agree with him completely. However,
that's the thing.
I won't agree with somebody calling someone a CUNT and you've not met them, you've not had any experience with them or anything like that. However, I don't know the background between oh God, the electrician workers branch, and Gary. So, and I don't want to know either, to be perfectly frank, because I'm not their fucking mothers. Excuse my language again, but I'm not their mum. Do you know what I mean?
Just to kind of really summarise on that, E5 as a group is the 5 of us. There's me,
Yes.
there's Paul, there's Dan, and there's Dave. And for the purpose of this question, not one of us have aligned with the EWB. We are supporting everybody. We are communicating with everybody, and we are polite and courteous in the way that we deal with the industry.
Yes, we go to NIC events to support the NIC. Darren Staniforth will agree.
Some of them.
We are going this week to an ECA event. Well, you'll find out when that goes to social media. No, we're not allowed to say it. But we are going to an ECA event. We are going to an NIC event. I currently hold my gold card still. I don't see any benefit in wasting energy in poisonous. Just ranting is pointless. Don't get me wrong, we can do it when we're doing it now. We're talking for an hour, but I don't think we're ranting. We're having a constructive conversation and respectfully agreeing or disagreeing.
Okay, we'll drop it there.
Do you know what? I'll happily, if I ever go up north, I'll happily meet him, shake his hand. I'll buy him lunch. I'll buy him a pint, and we'll put the world to rights. I haven't got a problem with that, but don't drag me into whatever your issues are. I haven't got the time. I'm not interested, and neither is E5.
Good stuff. That's a good answer. So we're over an hour, so I'm going to wrap this up. A couple of things I do want to say at the end of this podcast. We E5 group are going to be at Sandown. There is all 5 of us are going to be there. We have a stand which has kindly been given to us for nothing, just because of what we've done for the industry and what we can potentially do more in the industry.
What we're doing is the right term.
Yeah, what we're doing for the industry. So we're also doing a couple of talks, which is exciting, really, because we're looking forward to sitting in front of the industry and answering some of the questions, and not using that age-old term. I'll get back to you. We like to. There's so much experience in the E5 group that you can't. It's very rarely you would ask any of us a question if all 5 of us together, and we won't be able to give you the right answer. And we're going to challenge that. We're going to challenge ourselves on that. We're going to sit in front of a crowd, and we're just going to take questions on anything.
But in fairness, we're going to have our secret weapon with us as well.
We are having. I am so. In fact, and I know who you're talking about. When I went to the school the other day to pick my kids up, I posted a picture on the E5 Instagram. A guy I've known for a long time, because his kids go to the same school as mine, came up to me and said, and this is verbatim, "Oh my God, I didn't know you knew JW."
Really?
He said, "I didn't know you know JW and Sparky Ninja." I was like, "There's more of them. There's more of the E5 than just JW and Sparky Ninja." He went, "Yeah, but you're not JW and you're not Sparky Ninja. Can you get me some badges from them?" I thought, oh. So yeah.
It's weird how people. I think the one thing I don't realise is, and it's worth saying, and maybe that's where the previous question came from, is there's probably a lot of misconstrued misinterpretation of what E5 is. Today, one of my solar electrical contractors came up to me and he went, "Can I have your autograph?" And I went, "What do you mean?" He said, "Oh, we saw you in Pro Electrician magazine." And they wanted to talk about E5. And I literally said, "I'm not talking about E5. It's work time. We're talking about solar." But by the end of it, I did tell him what we were doing. And he just said, "Why?" So I told him why. And he was just like, "Oh, wow. God. Oh, okay. Now I can, it makes sense." But that's quite nice. But I think a lot of people, a lot of sparks, let's be honest about it, if you put this down to it, anybody who's worked industrial knows what the locker room banter, the site cabin banter is. I've spent weeks sat in site cabins, and by the time you've sat there for 2 weeks waiting for a delivery, you think aliens have landed, that Mars is next door to the moon, and just weird, man. You honestly, you talk yourselves into, and I'm sure if somebody raised E5 in a site cabin, it would go from it's a group of lads trying to help the industry to it's aliens taking over and they hate the NIC and they're actually the ECA, but they're trying to disrupt the industry. And there's this bloke Dempsey, but he's not a bloke, he's a lady, but he disguises himself as a man. Do you know, weird, mad, stupid ramblings that you get in site cabins? So none of it's true.
You're probably right.
Hearsay, rumour, conjecture.
So we will be at Alex. We're going to be there for the 2 days. Please come along. Get on our Instagram page, follow it, like the pictures, code the pictures, put the regulation number if you know it.
We'll tell you if you're right.
People's, and we'll give you the kind of the thumbs up or the thumbs down. Follow us on Twitter, and obviously subscribe to the podcast. We've got so much in the pipeline. We've got
we've got tons to do, haven't we?
Who are going to come and talk to us. And we only ask for one thing. So when manufacturers come on, when industry influencers, horrible word, but when industry people who we all know, when they come on, the only thing we ask is answer the questions from the heart. Don't worry about upsetting people, because people will engage with honesty.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, if I have upset anybody tonight, tough. No, I'm only joking. Sorry. No, apologies.
So thanks for listening. And
thank you. Cheers, Ryan. Thanks for pulling that on me.
Soon. Okay, thanks.